Hi everyone, I'm Joey and today we'll be talking about Lucerne Grand, one of the upcoming project right beside Lakeside MRT. Currently we do not have much information about this project, but I decided to shoot this video because one of my buyers actually asked me if she should be considering a stack facing the MRT because it's likely going to be cheaper. This is a valid concern because Lakeside MRT is on the east-west line, which is an above-ground MRT. So today, let's go deep as to whether MRT noise is a major concern and should we even consider it just because it's cheaper. More importantly, we want to know if a bad attribute in a project like MRT noise will pull the overall profitability down. So MRT noise aside, the pricing of Lucerne Grand will likely be setting a new benchmark as the land bid is one of the highest we have seen in the West so far. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you are looking at Lucerne Grand or not because what I'm going to share with you is an approach that you can use to analyze other projects or even resale. So before we proceed, I'll appreciate if you can take some time to like, share and subscribe to my video. And if you have any questions, feel free to scan my QR code and reach out to me via WhatsApp. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, Lucerne Grand is right beside Lakeside MRT and the developer is CDL. So the last launch we have in this area is Sora and Lake Garden around here. And Lake Garden is only left with 2 units and Sora is around 50% sold as of now. If you want something with a nice Jurong Lake view, Sora might be a project that you might want to consider. However, if you are big on MRT, then Lucerne Grand might be something that you are already waiting for. So if you see over here, Lucerne Grand is actually right beside Lakeside MRT. So definitely we'll be having some stacks that are facing the MRT, some that will be facing this small lake. And over here is Chng Secondary School. So if you buy high enough, you might be able to clear the school and have a nice view. Okay, if developer has launched some stacks over here, you might actually have a very nice view of Jurong Lake currently, but bear in mind that this plot of land is subjected to detailed planning, which means that if you pay a premium for it, there could also be a chance that, end of the day when you collect keys, this plot of land might be sold and it will block your view eventually. So the best way to look at whether MRT noise is a major concern is to look at lakefront residences. Why? Because number one, it's right beside Lucerne Grand, and secondly, it has MRT facing and also non-MRT facing. Okay, so for lakefront residences, I put out 2 units that were bought in 2010. So one of it is actually the MRT facing stack 37 and another is the non-MRT facing which is stack 18. So over here you can see that the MRT facing stack 37 is sold at a cheaper price at 807,000 and the non-MRT facing stack 18 was sold at a higher price of 825,000. So this means that the price difference is at 6.8%. Fast forward to the resale market, we see the price gap widening to 8.6%. So the unit that is facing MRT, they have sold for 1.26 million, whereas the non-MRT facing sold for 1.31 million. So what this means is that buyers in this area generally do not mind to pay a premium for a quieter facing. Likely it's also because they are looking for own stay. However, we also do not want to be paying a premium and end up our neighbours pulling our overall profitability down. So the more important question you should be asking is whether does having a less preferred facing in the condo actually drag down the overall profitability? Okay, so here I have an example of seaside residences. Seaside residences is along East Coast area, and like its name mentioned, the unique selling point of this project is the fact that it has sea-facing units. So over here, I have some units over here that is facing the sea, and stack 12, stack 14 that is not facing the sea. Okay, so if you follow me over here, in April 2025, we have a 2-bedder that was sold at 2520 PSF. And a couple of months later, a non-sea facing sold cheaper at 2439 PSF, which is rightfully so because a sea facing definitely has a higher premium. Okay, next up, we have another sea facing setting a new benchmark price in September 2025 at 2622 PSF. Okay, so there's a jump of 100 PSF. But what happens next is the non-sea facing, okay, in January 2026, they also managed to set a new price of 2533 PSF. So you can see in a short span of around half a year, the prices even for the non-sea facing jumped about 100 PSF. Okay, so what we see over here is a clear pattern that a good facing unit actually helps to set a new benchmark pricing and it will help the not so preferred facing to slowly pull up its prices. Okay, so a good facing definitely does help to push up prices by setting new records, but the question is whether a less preferred facing like the MRT noise will pull the overall profitability down. So let's look at Penrose. Penrose along the expressway, so we have some stacks over here, stack 8, stack 2, stack 17. They are all expressway facing and I also picked out another non-expressway facing which is stack 29. Okay, if you see over here, you will notice that the expressway facing was sold at around 14xx PSF, whereas the non-expressway facing actually managed to sell at a higher price of 1541 PSF. So this is because developer also knows that the expressway facing will be a less preferred stack. Alright, so now let's look at their resale prices. So over here, you can see that the non-expressway facing in April 2025, they sold at 2275 PSF. And shortly after, the expressway facing only managed to sell at 2133 PSF. But what is interesting is that if you see over here, the expressway facing units managed to actually pull up its prices over time. And eventually, right, they managed to sell at 2265 PSF, which is just a $10 PSF difference from the non-expressway unit. So very clearly, we can see over here that the prices are led by the non-expressway facing, and it helps to set the path for the expressway facing units to slowly increase its prices. So the main takeaway we have over here is that good facing does pull up prices, but bad facing does not drag down prices. I'm sure some of you have also heard agents saying that you should choose the less preferred stack because it is cheaper. And cheaper would always mean more profits. But is it really true? So even though we have seen how bad facing does not generally affect the prices of a condo, but if a MRT facing and a non-MRT facing is at the same price or only let's say a $5,000 different, definitely you will choose the non-MRT facing unit, right? So the question you should be asking is, how much cheaper should the MRT facing be so that it's worth considering? And this is what we want to understand very clearly before we go down for booking. So back to the example of lakefront residences earlier, we know that at launch, developer priced it at a 6.8% gap. Okay, and in the resale market, the gap actually widened to 8.6%. So if you see over here, you will notice that the MRT facing only profited 602 PSF, whereas the non-MRT facing managed to profit 672 PSF, which is 11.6% higher. So it's not always true that if you buy the cheaper facing, you'll definitely be profiting more. So how much cheaper should the MRT facing be so that it's worth considering? We actually do not want to look at the launch day pricing because this is just developers' benchmark. Alright, what we want to look at is the current accepted premium in the resale market. So for example, if today in a resale condo, we see the preferred facing selling for 220 PSF, whereas the not so preferred facing only sold for 2000 PSF, this means that resale buyers in the area are willing to pay 10% more for a preferred facing. Alright, so if we put it into Lucerne Grand, for example, if the developer is going to sell a MRT facing for more than 10% cheaper, then it is worth considering the MRT unit. However, if let's say they are only selling maybe about 5% cheaper, then you might want to consider topping up for the non-MRT facing unit instead. Over here, the magic number is 8.6% and not 6.8%. Of course, this is just a guidance and it's not a guaranteed number. But what I want to share with you is how we can use resale transactions to help us determine our entry price. So if it's a bit confusing, don't worry, just scan this QR code and I'll be happy to guide you through. With CDL purchasing the GLS land for 1132 PSF, there's a chance that Lucerne Grand might average around 2526 PSF. So if you want to know the safe entry price to enter and whether we can exceed in the future with profits, it is important for us to know the demographics of our future buyers. So for other projects, we always talk about HDB upgraders being our main source of exit strategy. However, the concern for Jurong area is the fact that Jurong HDB resale prices are generally not as high as other towns. However, if you look at recent launches, Jayden is at Jurong East MRT and they managed to sell 88% of its units on launch day and it hit a highest PSF of 2832 PSF in 2023 in Jurong. Okay, and the highest price hit for Jayden is 3.92 million, and this is Jurong. In Jayden, we noticed that majority of the buyers are coming from private address and not HDB upgraders. So this is similar to what we see in Lake Garden residences, where 52% of the buyers are private buyers. Alright, Lake Garden residences is not near MRT at all, but they managed to sell at 4.38 million. So if you ask me, I feel that Jurong people, they might be quite rich lah. So high PSF is not only seen in the new launch market but also in the resale market. J Gateway managed to sell at a record high of 2003 PSF and the average for the resale projects here is around maybe 1008 PSF. I would say that this is largely due to the fact that Jurong, despite one of the largest towns, the ratio of HDB to condo is actually lower than some other towns, for example, Punggol. If a buyer is looking for resale projects below 10 years old, they do not have much options to consider. They can only consider Lake Grand, Lakeview, Lake Life, which is a resale EC, Westwood, which is also another resale EC, as well as J Gateway. So the lack of young supply in this area is the key reason why the PSF is going up. In fact, one of my buyers shared with me that she has been looking in this area for the past year, but just can't find something suitable. And she also don't want to be paying too high a PSF in a resale condo, as it means higher risk for her. So she has decided to wait it out for Lucerne Grand so that she can get something younger, near MRT and also within 1 km to Rulang Primary School. So just now I mentioned that Lucerne Grand, they might average around 2526 PSF. However, just to note that all these condos over here are non-harmonized. So if we adjust it based on the estimated 7% gauge, the PSF becomes much higher. The resale average here would be around 2000 PSF, and the harmonized max PSF will be around 22 PSF over here. And if we take a look at the new launches, Jayden would then be around 3000 PSF. Sora and Lake Garden, which is much further away from the MRT like I shared earlier, they will be averaging around 23XX PSF. Lucerne Grand, which is right beside the MRT, if they are averaging about 25XX PSF, Lucerne Grand might seem that it's quite value for money. Also, with the upcoming transformation of the second CBD in Jurong, as well as the lifestyle changes, for example, the new science center over here, it will be interesting to see how Jurong will further transform. And I believe that when our new township in Tengah actually start to hit MOP, we will see an increase in demand. Where will these young buyers look at? I'm quite sure Lucerne Grand will be one of their top choice. Anyway, as we do not have more information about these projects like the floor plan and sizes, stay tuned to the part 2 of my analysis for Lucerne Grand. Alright, meanwhile, if you are keen in this project or you have any questions, feel free to scan this QR code and contact me. Also, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe my video, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!